Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
I swear, I've never been so frustrated in my life. You know how they say adulting is hard? Well, let me tell you, dealing with an HOA takes it to a whole new level of insanity. I thought I was doing everything right, following the rules, being a responsible homeowner. But apparently, that's not enough for these people. I'm sitting at home, minding my own business, scrolling through my emails like any normal person does. And then bam, out of nowhere, I get this email that's basically telling me I need to fork over $800 in the next 30 days. Just like that. No warning, no heads up, nothing. They're calling it a special assessment, which is just a fancy way of saying, surprise, we need more of your money. Come on. Who has $800 just lying around, ready to be handed over at a moment's notice? I've got bills to pay, groceries to buy, and don't even get me started on the cost of gas these days. But apparently, none of that matters to the HOA. They just expect us to magically produce this money out of thin air. And you know what's even better? The way they handle our regular dues payments. They've got this ACH system set up, which sounds all fancy and convenient, right? Wrong. It's just another way for them to reach into our pockets without us even realizing it. They put our information into their system, and boom, money disappears from our accounts every month. It's like they're playing Robin Hood, except instead of stealing from the rich to give to the poor, they're just, stealing. But here's where it gets really interesting. This amazing system they've set up, it can't even handle the full amount of this special assessment. Nope, it's got some kind of limit. So instead of taking out the full $800, it's only taking out a portion. You'd think they'd mention this little detail, right? Give us a heads up that we need to make other arrangements for the rest of the payment? That would be too easy. So there I am, thinking everything's fine. The ACH system is doing its thing, taking out what it can each month. I figure, okay, it'll take a little longer to pay off, but at least it's getting paid, right? Wrong again. Next thing I know, I'm getting another email from the HOA. This time, they're warning me about a late fee. A late fee? Can you believe it? Naturally, I'm confused. I've set up this ACH thing like they wanted. It's taking out money every month. So how can I possibly be late? So I reach out to them, trying to figure out what's going on. And that's when they drop this bombshell on me. Apparently, I was supposed to go around their own payment system to pay the special assessment in full. Now, I'm no rocket scientist, but I'm pretty sure that if you set up a payment system, you should use it. Or at the very least, if there are limitations to it, you should tell people about those limitations. But nope, not our HOA. They just expect us to read their minds or something. So, of course, I go back to check that first email about the special assessment. You know, the one where they dropped the $800 bomb on us. I figure surely they must have mentioned something about this ACH partial payment issue. But guess what? Not a word. Not a single solitary word about how their own system can't handle the payment they're demanding from us. Seriously, what kind of operation are they running here? It's like they're actively trying to make our lives difficult. And the worst part is, there's nothing we can do about it. We're stuck with them, trapped in this bizarre world where logic and common sense apparently don't apply. You know, when I bought this house, I thought joining an HOA would be a good thing. I had visions of well-maintained common areas, friendly neighbors, maybe even some community events. Instead, what I got was this Kafkaesque nightmare of surprise fees, confusing payment systems, and zero communication. And it's not just the money, although that's a big part of it. It's the principle of the thing. It's the feeling that they don't respect us as homeowners, as people who are just trying to live our lives and take care of our homes. They treat us like we're just walking wallets, here for their convenience. I've tried talking to my neighbors about it, and it turns out I'm not alone in feeling this way. Everyone's got a story about some ridiculous HOA rule or unexpected fee. There's the guy down the street who got fined because his grass was half an inch too long. The woman on the corner who had to repaint her entire house because the shade of beige she chose wasn't on the approved color list. It's like we're living in some kind of suburban dystopia. And the worst part is, there's no escape. Sure, I could sell my house and move somewhere without an HOA. But in this market, with housing prices the way they are, fat chance. Plus, even if I could afford to move, who's to say the next place wouldn't be just as bad or worse? So here I am, stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do I pay the late fee, even though I don't think I should have to? Do I try to fight it, knowing that I'll probably just end up with more fees and a big headache? Or do I just suck it up and pay, knowing that this probably won't be the last time something like this happens? I've tried reaching out to the HOA board, thinking maybe if I could just explain the situation, they'd understand. But it's like talking to a brick wall. They just keep pointing to the rules, as if that explains everything. As if the rules themselves aren't the problem. And, what's really frustrating? I know there are good HOAs out there. I've heard stories from friends in other neighborhoods talking about how their HOA actually helps the community. They organize block parties. They negotiate better rates for services like trash collection. They actually communicate with the homeowners. It's like hearing about some mythical utopia, so different from what we're dealing with here. I've even thought about running for the HOA board myself. Be the change you want to see and all that. But then I think about all the time and energy that would take on top of my already busy life. And I can't. I shouldn't have to take on a second job just to make sure my HOA isn't screwing me over. So here I am, venting to anyone who will listen. My friends are probably sick of hearing about it by now. My family just tells me to pay the fee and be done with it. But I can't let it go. It's not just about the money anymore. It's about feeling powerless in my own home, in my own community. I keep thinking there has to be a solution. There has to be some way to make this better. But every time I think I've figured something out, the HOA throws another curveball. It's like they're always one step ahead, always finding new ways to make our lives difficult. And you know what the real kicker is? I bet if I went to one of their meetings and brought this up, they'd act like I'm the unreasonable one. Like I'm causing problems by not just quietly handing over my money and following their nonsensical rules. They'd probably give me some line about how this is all for the good of the community, as if randomly demanding $800 from people is somehow building community spirit. I've even thought about getting a lawyer involved, but then I look at the HOA agreement I signed when I bought the house. It's practically ironclad. They've covered all their bases, made sure they have the right to do pretty much whatever they want. And even if I could find some loophole, some way to fight back, is it really worth the time and money it would take? So here I am, stuck in this ridiculous situation. I've got an $800 bill I wasn't expecting, a payment system that doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and an HOA that seems more interested in collecting fees than actually helping the community. And the cherry on top of this whole mess? A late fee for not psychically knowing that their system couldn't handle the payment they demanded. They say home ownership is the American dream. Well, if this is the dream, I think I'd rather wake up. At least in my nightmares, I don't have to deal with HOA fees. But what can I do? I can't change the system. I can't make them see reason. All I can do is vent my frustrations and hope that maybe, just maybe, someone out there is listening. Someone who can actually make a difference. In the meantime, I guess I'll just have to grit my teeth, write that check, and hope that this is the last special assessment for a while. But something tells me it won't be. Something tells me this is just the beginning of a long, frustrating battle with the HOA. So yeah, this is definitely the most fun I've ever had. Absolutely, living the dream right here. Who needs peace of mind or financial stability when you can have the thrill of never knowing when your HOA is going to spring another surprise on you? It's like living in a really boring, really expensive haunted house. You never know what's going to jump out at you next, but you can be pretty sure it's going to cost you money. Did you know that you could file a claim with your bank if money is removed without your authorization? I assume you only gave the HOA permission to remove monthly dues. They would need you to separately authorize the special assessment payment. It's so great to live in a condo and then start a B session when an emergency repair comes up. You know what happens to the rest of us when our water heater breaks or our heater goes out all of a sudden? We fork it out on the spot, right then and there, usually to the tune of thousands of dollars. What does every condo owner here seem to do? About how they're being robbed, and it's not fair that they should have to pay a several $100 assessment. Welcome to ownership. Shit breaks, and very unexpected items come up that you're not ready for. The rest of us have to. And I don't understand why condo owners think it doesn't apply to them, only to be shocked later when the condo collapses. Nah, this is typical condo living. They vote against raising rates because they don't want to pay more. The reserves are then never fully funded. Then a sudden issue comes up, and because they always vote to not raise the dues, They get a sudden assessment. The story is always the same. It's the equivalent of me never saving for a rainy day and not maintaining things properly because I don't want to pay for the maintenance either, and then throwing a fit when a bill comes due. The biggest giveaway is also that they never actually know what it's for or why. My elderly in-laws live in a gated community in Florida, right next to the villages. For years, this community has operated without a HOA, but there has been a persistent push to establish one. They already pay $130 a month for pool maintenance and front gate security. My father-in-law, who often mocks the numerous violations and fines in the villages, was nonchalant about the recent vote to implement an HOA. He believed that his laid-back neighbors would ensure nothing changed. When I asked if he voted, he said he didn't because it didn't matter to him. I warned him that all the issues he reads about in other HOA-run communities could soon be his reality, and that dues would likely increase significantly. Now, I'm just sitting back with my popcorn, waiting for the chaos to unfold. The vote passed with a slim majority. 51% of the residents voted in favor of establishing an HOA. Almost immediately, things began to change. The first sign of trouble was the new set of rules mailed to every resident. The document was thick, filled with regulations about everything from lawn maintenance to the color of house paint. My father-in-law scoffed at it, tossing it aside with a dismissive wave. "They're not going to enforce half of this stuff," he said confidently. But he was wrong. The first enforcement came swiftly. One of their neighbors, Mr. Thompson, received a fine for having a garden gnome on his lawn. Apparently, decorative items were now restricted to a specific list provided by the HOA. Mr. Thompson was furious, but his appeals fell on deaf ears. The HOA board, comprised of newly elected residents, was determined to enforce the rules strictly. My father-in-law watched in disbelief as more fines were handed out for minor infractions: a slightly overgrown hedge, a flagpole that was too tall, a car parked in the driveway overnight. As the weeks went by, the atmosphere in the community shifted. Neighbors who once greeted each other warmly now avoided eye contact, fearful of being reported for some trivial violation. The sense of camaraderie was replaced by suspicion and resentment. My father-in-law, who had always prided himself on his well-kept lawn, found himself fined for having a bird feeder that didn't meet the HOA's specifications. He was livid, but there was little he could do. The HOA had the power to enforce the rules, and they did so with a zeal that bordered on fanaticism. The financial impact was immediate. The $130 monthly fee quickly ballooned as the HOA introduced new charges for various improvements and services. Security was upgraded, but it came with a hefty price tag. The pool area was renovated, but the cost was passed on to the residents. My in-laws' monthly dues doubled within 6 months. My father-in-law, who had always been careful with money, found himself struggling to keep up with the rising costs. He regretted not voting against the HOA, but it was too late. The final straw came when the HOA decided to repave the roads within the community. The project was expensive, and the cost was divided among the residents. My in-laws received a bill for thousands of dollars. My father-in-law was apoplectic. He attended the next HOA meeting to voice his concerns, but he was met with indifference. The board members, who had once been his friends and neighbors, were now unyielding enforcers of the rules. They dismissed his complaints, citing the need for community improvements. The stress took a toll on my in-laws' health. My father-in-law, who had always been robust and active, began to suffer from high blood pressure. My mother-in-law, who had always been cheerful and sociable, became withdrawn and anxious. The community that had once been their haven had turned into a source of constant stress and financial strain. One evening, as we sat on their porch, my father-in-law turned to me with a weary look. "You were right," he admitted. "This HOA has ruined everything." There was a bitterness in his voice that I had never heard before. The sense of betrayal was palpable. The community that had once been a peaceful retirement haven had become a battleground of fines, regulations, and escalating costs. As the months dragged on, the situation worsened. The HOA continued to find new ways to extract money from the residents. They introduced mandatory landscaping services, which were exorbitantly priced. They imposed fines for any deviation from the approved list of plants and flowers. My in-laws' savings dwindled as they struggled to keep up with the relentless financial demands. The social fabric of the community was torn apart. Long-standing friendships were strained as neighbors turned against each other, reporting violations to the HOA in a bid to avoid scrutiny themselves. The sense of unity and mutual support that had once defined the community was replaced by a climate of fear and hostility. My in-laws' health continued to decline. The constant stress and financial pressure took a heavy toll. My father-in-law, once a vibrant and active man, became a shadow of his former self. My mother-in-law, who had always been the heart of their social circle, withdrew into herself, avoiding social interactions out of fear of being reported for some minor infraction. The final blow came when the HOA decided to introduce a special assessment to fund a new clubhouse. The cost was astronomical, and the residents were required to pay thousands of dollars each. My in-laws, already stretched to their financial limits, were devastated. They had no choice but to pay, but the strain was too much. My father-in-law suffered a heart attack shortly after receiving the bill. He survived, but his health was permanently compromised. The community that had once been their dream retirement destination had turned into a nightmare. The HOA, which was supposed to protect and enhance the community, had become a tyrannical force, imposing arbitrary rules and extracting money at every turn. My in-laws, like many of their neighbors, were trapped in a cycle of escalating costs and relentless stress. As I sat with my father-in-law in the hospital, he looked at me with a mixture of regret and resignation. "I should have listened to you," he said quietly. "This HOA has destroyed our lives." There was nothing I could say to comfort him. The damage was done, and there was no way to undo it. In the end, my in-laws were forced to sell their home and move to a more affordable community. The process was heartbreaking. They had invested so much in their home, both financially and emotionally, and leaving it behind was a bitter pill to swallow. The sense of betrayal was profound. The community that had once been their sanctuary had turned into a source of relentless stress and financial ruin. As they packed up their belongings and prepared to leave, my father-in-law turned to me with a look of determination. "We'll start over," he said. "We'll find a place where we can live in peace." But the scars of their experience with the HOA would remain. The sense of security and community that they had once cherished was shattered, replaced by a deep-seated mistrust of any form of communal governance. My in-laws' experience stands as a poignant reminder of the potential pitfalls of homeowners associations. The promise of a well-maintained, secure community can quickly turn into a nightmare when an HOA becomes overzealous and financially exploitative. The very institution that is supposed to protect and enhance the community can become its greatest threat, imposing arbitrary rules and extracting money at every turn. For my in-laws, the dream of a peaceful retirement in a gated community turned into a relentless struggle against an unyielding and tyrannical HOA. Probably CCNRS, but no official HOA. You basically have to sue your neighbor if they are breaking their part of the bargain. My parents were part of something like this for a community well. No idea how a bank account would be set up without an official company name, though. It's the Del Webb brand. These are the sort of Stepfordian hellscapes where grandparents have to sell their forever home if something happens to their adult child and they end up as guardians of their grandkids because it's against the rules for anyone under 55 to be there for more than a certain number of days, and these places will sue. My mom and her third husband lived in a Del Webb subrogatory for a few years.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.